Okay. Cool. All right. Welcome everybody to the Canberra ADUG May 2021 session. And today we're going to be talking a bit about the Python4Delphi, which is a library, if you want to call it, that allows us to integrate Python with Delphi. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But as always, sort of like to start off with a few news items. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And here we go, desktop one. And so first news item I came up with is Microsoft dropping it IE 11. And don't know whether or not that's going to affect you or your customers. I believe some of the versions of Delphi, the web component actually uses IE 11. So that's maybe how it affects you, or obviously with any web stuff that might be dependent on an ancient version of Internet Explorer.
So does that mean when that, by dropping it, it means that library is no longer available for an embedded component like
I don't know, because I would assume that the embedded component is calling IE directly via COM, probably.
So it would just disappear, basically?
Yeah, I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
Like all things, suck it and see. You have to wait until it comes out. You may be able to load it manually. I guess there's a lot of places that large organizations that have large applications that only work in IE. So there may be some pressure on them to release a version of IE directly. I think there's the Edge browser, as it says here, has an IE mode, but whether or not people are able to know how to set that up, be interesting. Interesting to see. I was going to mention, I noticed on the Embarcadero site an offer on C++ Builder. I think they were looking at changing a way of raising revenue, and they were talking about a $500 a year option. Now, I don't know if that was only available in the US or what, but I went to the Embarcadero site today to find the reference, and I couldn't find anything at all about it. So maybe that idea is being ditched. So that was that. As some of you may realise, I have sort of a bit of an active interest in cyber security, and I came across an article, and then that, as one thing leads to another, talking about rats, which are depending on who you are. It could be a remote administration tool, but it's also known as a remote access Trojan. So what happens is people will try and breach your network, get one of these tools on board on one of your machines, and then they can do all sorts of things in terms of finding out what's going on. And I came across this article, which I thought was pretty interesting, which is somebody who's talking through this. There's this one of these rats, and he's basically doing an analysis, reverse engineering of this tool, and looking at all the different how it works, how it does things, and he sort of steps through that. So I found that quite an interesting process that he was going through. So I thought I'd mention that. If you're interested in that whole rat world, this seems to be, this is an open source project, which I also came across, async rat. So you can actually download the code from this. So what does it allow you to do? So you get this on a machine, and it'll talk back to your machine. You can see what's on the screen and record it. Antivirus and integrity manager, so it probably turns those things off for you. SFTP to upload and download, so you can exfiltrate all your secret files, all your customer data, or all your proprietary code, or it can also download other nefarious payloads onto your systems. Chat windows, multi-server support, password recovery, which is very interesting. You can get to the files, and once you've got your password file, there's various tools out there. Common one is called John the Ripper, or John, which is a password recovery tool that's out there. Client just-in-time compiler, so it can put things on your machine and compile it and run it. So it's from source code. Key loggers, so that when you start logging to your bank accounts, it can see what keys you're doing. All sorts of anti-malware startup. That's pretty good. Configure your server for you. All sorts of lots of things. You know, these are the sort of tools that we hear about when sites get compromised. People just want to stick this kind of thing on your machine, and then they can do whatever they want in your systems. This one probably isn't the worst one that's out there. It's an open source project. I think on the insights, it's had a few forks, hasn't been up. This particular one hasn't been updated for a while, since middle of May last year, but there's a few branches out there where you could go and get some updates and things on it. So yeah, be afraid, be very afraid. But it's also very fascinating, the whole cyber, well, I find it very fascinating, the whole cybersecurity area. Just a quick mention, David Room in Melbourne is seeking an experienced Delphi developer on a 6-month contract. There was a mail out through the ADUG mailing list I received today. So if you're interested in looking for work, either check your mailbox, or if you don't have the details, just give me a buzz and I can put you in touch. Okay. And that's basically all my news for now. Let's get stuck into the main part of tonight's presentation. So again, off the Embarcadero blogs, this one caught my eye, 6 way to collect data. And as you can see, it's pretty recent. So I had a look into this, and he's talking about web scraping and methods of pulling down data off the web through web scraping. And basically he was using the Delphi plus Python, or that'd be Python plus Delphi, and using this library to make the life the tasks a bit easier. So also having a bit of an interest in Python. I've never done a great deal in Python, just a few uni projects and a few side projects on my own, including web scraping. This sort of, I thought, okay, let's look into this. So I'll have this link on the, I'll put this link out on the, when I put out the YouTube of this, of tonight's presentation. Basically, you need to go to this GitHub repository, and it's got quite a bit of information on this, why you want to be using Python4Delphi, but they also have links into Lazarus. So if you, if that's where you're living, this can work for you as well.
Yeah, there's lots of good, there's really good tutorials. There's a whole bunch of them you can go through, look at different features that it's got.
Yeah.
And on YouTube, there's a whole bunch of videos as well, worth watching.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm just going to do probably quite a brief fly over this, mainly because I'm not an expert by any means in Python, and it would probably take me all night otherwise. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll see what I can make up as an answer.
What, excuse me, what versions of Delphi would it support?
Okay. Well, it says, here we go. I've got it, that it's meant to support all versions, I think from about, is it 7 and up? Let's have a look at the wiki. Go to the wiki. Here we go. Now, supported platforms. All versions, the platforms, and Delphi 2009 or later. So I assume, is that the Unicode versions? Would that be right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, they do have in the install instructions which is what we'll need to follow. There are installation instructions and supported platforms. There we go. How come we don't have a back button on this? That's interesting. If we go to the installation, it suggests that for Delphi Sydney and later, which is 10.4.1, you've got a slightly different method of installing rather than the previous versions. So I can confirm that if you try and install this on 10.4 using these instructions, it doesn't work. But so I've got this installed on my machine. So basically, the steps are to install Python and download the code from this repository. Add the appropriate paths to the IDE's library paths, and install the module. And basically that should work. So now let's just have a quick run through. There's a set of slides that's also you can get to from here. I thought I would just use these as a quick talking point. And this is off one of the webinars which is on there, one of the video links. We'll just skip through some of these. Introduction to Python. I mean, basically Python's a scripting language, and there's hundreds of thousands of libraries that can do all sorts of things. There's artificial intelligence libraries, there's image processing, encryption, you name it, there's probably it's in there. And web scraping libraries. It does have its limitations. It is a scripted language, and as such, performance can be an issue at times. Although I should point out some of these libraries are actually C++ or C libraries that are linked into Python and actually do run very quickly. So it's not always an issue. And yeah, so, you know, if you're going to be using this with Delphi, there may be certain areas where you might want to use Delphi for the speed. Python, it is not, you can't have multiple threads in Python. There are libraries to simulate multiple threads, but Python itself isn't multiple threaded. So, you know, there could be a number of reasons why you'd want to use Python with Delphi, and you know, it all depends on your use case. So let's go to the next one. Python, why should I care? Well, there's a lot of Delphi usage out there. A lot of people looking for Delphi people. Here we go, data analytics. Rapidly replacing Java as the core programming language. I don't know what the evidence on that is. It may be. Huge number. Okay, 250,000 packages available. So there's probably something in there for everybody. Okay.
Don't you think it's a bit sad if it's replacing any sort of compiled language in a computer science degree, because it implies a sort of whole hands-off attitude?
It's not that simple. You'll find that if you get into Python, the number of add-ons they've got are written in C or C++, and they're blindingly fast.
Yeah.
So perhaps just the skeleton of the thing may be pure Python, but once you get into things like NumPy, Matplotlib, neural networks, etc., they're just incredibly good and powerful.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really my point. My point is that you're not learning about the nuts and bolts. And if you're using libraries that you don't build yourself and you don't see the language behind them, I don't think that's necessarily a good educational tool.
That's the same with any Delphi application and library you get. Unless you study the source code, what you want to do is to be able to use them. And that's where you learn your Python skills to prepare the data to supply to these things. And once you get it back from them, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Look, as I said, I don't know what the data to support that assertion is. So I'm not making a comment. You know, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, I guess with all languages, you need to learn the basics. You need to learn the iteration, how you go about doing things, variables. The first language I learned was BASIC, which is a scripting language, and effectively, and I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but it's.
I think your talk at the moment is very timely, given that just recently there's been discussion on the about web scraping. If you want to web scrape easily, do it in Python.
Yes.
And if you can incorporate that in your Delphi programs, you're sort of matching and blending the two topics that have come up in the last week.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So, I mean, and this is what it's saying, is you can incorporate Python into your Delphi applications, and you can make code developed in Delphi accessible from Python as well. So it's a two-way street. And I've got to say, I'm not familiar with all of what Python4Delphi can do. I'll just have to refer you all back to that, to the GitHub. And I guess we're talking about combining the strengths of each language. TIOB index, I'm always wary about these. I think it's carefully, and I think here's a comparison that we can't actually see on the screen. Okay. Oh yes, no, that's everything. So object-oriented, multi-platform, REPL, typing, yes, no, and performance. So I again, I don't fully agree on that. As Jim mentioned, some of these libraries are highly optimized and do perform very well. Multi-threading.
Yeah, there's good threading libraries, threading and concurrent libraries for Python.
Yes.
I've used them and they work really well.
Yeah. And it's rad. Well, yeah, I don't know if you'd make a front-end standalone application in Python, but I'm sure people have done that.
Yeah, there's a couple of really good notable ones out there that have used Python for GUI applications.
Yep. Now, I believe that one of the Python editors was actually written in Delphi, which is by the person who has put together this bridging project. So, all right. So that was all the slides I was going to show. I think I was going to go and hop into some demonstrations just to give a little idea of what can be done. So this is the unit 1. This is the very basic demonstration. Basically, once you've installed that, once you've installed the bridge, you've got a few extra tools available. And let's have a look. They should be down here. Python engine, type module, and looks like two of the same thing, but not quite the same. What we have here is quite simple, the Python engine, and it's just I haven't tweaked anything. These, by the way, all these demonstrations are available, have been downloaded straight from that site, and I've tweaked them minorly to run. Like this one, I've put a clear output before execute. The code behind this is basically this. This is the code I've added. Python execute whatever's in the memo script, 1 line, and button to click is to open and close the script file. So if we just run this, now this may or may not wake up my antivirus software, which will ask me if I want to give it access. But to the internet, if I say print 2 + 2, off it goes. So this is Python executing this code. Now, that's a very simplistic Python script. I should have said hello world. So this is an example of a screen scraping script, which I basically took from that article. From the Embarcadero blog. I've just made a couple of minor adjustments to it. And so, for example, usually you import all your libraries at the start. I just thought I'd put the import in so you can sort of see the speed of where things are. There's a map reference, and okay, basically it's just going to So I'm going to request the data. It's going to do this requests. This is the library for retrieving data. And this is a very basic request, of course. So it retrieves the data from the site. Once it's got it, it's using the beautiful soup library, which is here, imports BS4 from the beautiful soup. And it's looking for certain areas on the web page. I should probably open up the web page and see. So this is the web, sort of the web page. If we press F12, we can have a look at various areas on the web page. So we can see it grabs the data, which is this. We've got the page here from the request. We'll put in the page content through Beautiful Soup. So we've got a variable called soup, which is now an object. It's looking for the 7-day. It's looking for something called a 7-day forecast. So we can copy that and have a look for the 7-day forecast, which is this panel. As you can see, as I highlight here, it's showing you on the web page what's forecasting. Within the forecast, within that, it's looking for all the tombstones containers, and we can find that somewhere. Oh, there should be ways to do this. Which again, you can see this is a tombstone container. So there's a whole bunch of these. And then it's going to look in each site, in each one of these. It's going to look for an image, and there's some alternate text on each image. So basically it's finding the images, and we're using the description of the title, and get some temperatures and descriptions. And what it's doing is it's creating a thing called a data frame, which is sort of like an array structure, and we're just basically going to print it. So let's just run this. Let's see if it's probably going to cause this. Now, unfortunately, when this happens, and this is because of my McAfee antivirus, it will. Okay, so here we go. It will crash. So this might have been the previous version I had running. Not. So there's the output. So it's requested the data, and it's very quickly parsed it and pulled out information. So that's pretty cool. And as you can see, it's not a very large script in order to do this. So that was the first demonstration. And as mentioned previously, there's been some discussion about screen scraping, and yep, I've written a screen scraper to hunt down dead links within websites, which I've used and sort of works reasonably well.
The parsing that it's doing, that's specific HTML parsing, isn't it? It's not just generic text parsing. Is that correct?
That's correct. So that particular library, that Beautiful Soup library, is a library that allows you to look at what's inside of the web page and find things. Let me run it again if you like. So what it's doing is, if we run through this, this is where it's going out to the web, pulling in that page. This is where it's parsing it through the beautiful soup library. And this is saying, okay, find me the content on the page, which has got an ID of 7-day forecast. Now, there's different ways of finding content. It could be, see, that's by ID. This is by class. And again, if we want to have a look at
Soup is only useful for parsing HTML. Is that the case?
Basically, yes. I don't know if you'd want to parse how it would go for parsing XML. I mean, XML pretty much and HTML very similar. But this particular library, yes, is specifically designed for that purpose. So Python.
And I think it's discussed on the list, but this would be defeated by a website that would use JavaScript to dynamically construct certain elements and so on, wouldn't it?
Yes, this one would. I believe in that original Embarcadero blog, there are libraries available. It was mentioned, I believe it was there. If not, you'll have to Google it, which basically run like an embedded browser that will sort of bring down the library and run the code, and then execute the JavaScript, and then you can pull off the DOM model and do the same kind of processing off the DOM model.
Okay.
So
can I suggest you go to YouTube and look up web scraping? You will get so much information, you will be blown away.
Yeah.
In particular, the tutorials that they have on how you scrape, what you scrape, and what you do with it are just really good. And what Steve shown us here is just the very tip of the iceberg. They've even got libraries that allow you to automate your responses on a web page. Look for what you want, click, and basically write a person to use the web script for you, the website for you. Log in, extract data, images, all the sort of stuff that we've been talking about here.
Yep. So as an aside, I mean, there's quite a lot of single page applications or SPAs. If you're looking at, I do development in Vue and Angular, which are both produce SPA applications. But one disadvantage of those applications is that many of the search engines aren't able to go through the site. Now, using some of these techniques, Google's a bit coy as to whether they do use this kind of thing to go through websites, but certainly some of the other search engines do not. There's obviously a lot higher processing load for that to happen on every website, and then to click on every link within a SPA application, but it can be done. It can be done. Okay, now these are the demonstration projects. I just picked a couple which I thought might be interesting. If we have a look at this one. This is a demonstration of two-way interaction between Delphi and Python. So we have on the left some obviously Delphi code. On the right, we have a script, and so that it sets up some variables, prints properties. So this variable is called properties. Title is properties value title. So, and the other end, we're creating a properties. So we're creating a thing called a dictionary. It's similar to a Delphi dictionary, similar. Setting the strings and with the keys. So there we go. It's setting them from the checkbox, the title, the edit names. So these are obviously the fields. And there's an update properties, which goes the reverse way. So we're going to update the screen from the Python object. Does that make sense? So in this example, we're going to, so basically we've got this Python variable or object. It comes in, it's visible to Python. Python can read the values in this way, properties.value, title is equal to that. We can set a value back into this variable. We set in a variable called age, which here we see is 35. And then I reassign the same object, properties.value equal properties.value. And there's probably an event on here that says on change, it's going to update the properties given the F properties. And where's F properties coming into all of this, which is our Python object.
In the object inspector for the Python Delphi var1.
I don't know.
Now, in the object inspector for the Python Delphi var1, there's a property module. Can you just explain what that's all about?
The property module there.
Yeah.
Module main. Okay, that's interesting because your main is usually.
So var name's obviously got to match its properties is what you're using in the script.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. And as I said, I haven't delved into this in a great detail. So the answer is probably there in the screen or in one of the tutorials.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's just run this. So, okay, we've got Mr. Smith, the title. We can make it Dr. Smith, and say age 35. We're going to execute the script. Now, this is something interesting that I only noticed about 5 minutes prior to the opening the show tonight. Okay, let's have a look, see what's happening here. Okay, so that's better. All right, it's just a wrapping issue with that. So Python Delphi var. So it's printing the properties object. Get one of the properties. Title is properties title. Name is Smith. So read and write the properties. Properties name. If properties sex of male is female. Print the properties. And we can change the name. We can say 45. You can execute the script and you can see it's now changed back across there. The same with these kind of things. If we take these things off, then you'll see that these have changed from true to false.
Steve, all the double underscores, do you know what the significance of those is?
I should do. These are so this is defining a class within Python, and then this is the initialization of that class. Set attributes if the key is Delphi var.
You know, if they're you see them in regular Python code, or is it just because we're interfacing with Delphi here that we're seeing those double underscores?
You would see these in regular Python code, I believe. Is that correct, Jim?
Pretty much. The double underscores in init and some of the others there are done that way specially to highlight and show that basically, I'm trying to grab a mouse. The init is the creation of an object. So it's saying if you're going to create something of class properties, you've got to go through this init version function. So it's nothing special. It's just the way they do it to distinguish it from other classes and methods you might instantiate.
So
For example, that's the one down the bottom, str. That allows you to use a print statement on the property, and that's why you're seeing that information coming out. It turns everything into a string and it uses it accordingly.
That's right. That's right. So you can see here it's creating a variable called self.Delphi var equals what's been passed in the Delphi var. So getting an attribute uses the self.dict, which is self.dict. Also, I'm not quite sure. Is this a? Certainly looking at this variable and then getting the value of the key from the dictionary. So I'm not sure this where this is defined. That must be a standard, like the string. This must be a standard thing within a class. I don't know. You may notice within Python that it's based on indentation rather than begin end or other curly brackets constructs. So it's very much defined by, we've got the if statement, and then anything underneath that's indented is within that if block. Then you have the else block, and this is the code that runs as part of that else block. If you have something that doesn't line up quite correctly, I think it will give us an error. It says, look, sorry, I can't handle that because that's bad code. But that's part of the Python, how Python is, how Python works. There's also a million YouTube videos on learning Python as well.
100.
Yeah. The last demonstration I thought I'd show is using a library, an image processing library, and let's just make that a bit big. No, okay, that's not a good idea, Steve. Let's just run it. So there's a bit of code in here, which is image to pi bytes. So it's doing, Delphi's doing a little bit of translation here. We've got opening pictures and clicking. I haven't been through this code, to be honest. I just looked at the project and said, that looks like an interesting demonstration. Let's just run it, because that way we can have a better look at the code down here. So we're importing some libraries, and there's two functions here. Define process image with data. It's going to print off some information, bytes. Basically, it's going to open the stream, processing the image. We're just going to use a routine within this this image library, just to rotate it and return the new image. So image to bytes. Okay, so let's just open a picture. So Python for developers, hit that. So, you know, that's allowing internet. No, we don't want to have games. So it's pretty snappy. That's not a very large picture. 47 kilobytes. So what's that one? That one's 710. Goodness knows. But it's a bit, wrong button. So there we go. If you drink too much, you go around in circles. So there's just a couple of ideas and uses for why you might want to.
Steve.
Hello.
Question, it says that you have to install Pillow for this particular one. Does that mean you can't then distribute this?
So I'm having a lot of difficulty hearing you.
Yeah, same here.
Just asking if you can distribute that app, or you have to have the.
So
Python.
if you're deploying this app, if you're deploying this particular application, what would you have to distribute with it?
You'd have to make sure. Well, okay. So on the looking at the website, and let me just go back to. Let me just. I've got to do a trick here to go to Google Chrome. You have the ability to create wrap-up using wrap objects, Delphi, to using a Python script, or you can create Python modules with Delphi class. Access to Python objects. I believe one of the things that you can do is to wrap stuff into a DLL. You can create Python extensions as DLLs and much more. That's Python extension. You would probably have to make sure that Python's installed on the machine that's running it. There is a lot of talk about accessing the Python DLL, and I don't know, but maybe it's just a matter of distributing the Python DLL with your application.
There's a wiki topic there, how Python4Delphi finds your Python distribution. Down
Yeah.
lower.
Now within the wiki, it how Python finds your Python distribution. There is a talk about this. DLL registered as known false. So it sounds that all you need is actually that DLL. And then load the DLL. So I'm guessing that's all you possibly have to do.
And what about the extra library.
Yeah, the pillow and the libraries. Do you know that, like the pillow library and so on? Can you distribute that the same way?
I don't know. You'd probably have to, like all of these things, it's probably got some sort of licensing, and you'd have to look at what each of those licenses are. I mean, there's a lot of different open source licenses, and whether you're able to put it into a application that's for commercial use or not. That's something that we've got to do with all the libraries that we choose to use with our applications. I don't know at the end of the day whether the libraries are or aren't. I certainly haven't got enough experience with this to answer that question. A definite maybe, maybe not, if that answers the question. All right, so
Versions does it support? Is it like Python 3 or?
yeah, well, look, Python 2 is pretty much getting deprecated, or out of, I don't know what, I think that's, if it hasn't been taken out of it will be relatively soon. Let's
Compare it to using Delphi 2 versions Delphi versus Delphi 10. Nobody would any nowadays.
Yeah, supported platforms. Let's have a look. Nah, this is just talking about the platforms itself. And I think it talks about, it only talks about version 3 Python that I recall seeing in this.
That's what I'm trying to say. Delphi Python 2 is almost completely non-usable nowadays.
Yeah. Okay.
They
So
say
there's,
you should use possibly 3.6 upwards.
so there is a link this here, P4D Python 2.6. So if there are certain applications out there that haven't been upgraded to Python 3, I suspect that if you're in a situation where you've decided that you need to use Python with Delphi for whatever reason, for whatever library, or you're trying to improve performance, it's probably going to be a new application that's in a more current version of Python in any case. So that's my guess. Of course, each case is going to be unique, and you'd have to look at that. But yeah, I mean, the recommendation is to use a modern version of Python. Now, let me just have a look. Here was a few notes that I made for tonight. That's not quite true. I tried to install the Sydney version on 10.4, which obviously didn't work. So I should actually get rid of that. So these are the steps. Install Python, download from GitHub, update your IDE paths. There's a separate source and VCL, VCL and FireMonkey directories. So obviously, if you're not using FireMonkey, you don't add that one. But if you do, and VCL, you add them both. I think Jim McKeith was saying he thinks the libraries, I think he's used it on Macs and Linux, and he said the library probably works under iOS, but the problem there is he didn't know whether you could install Python on iOS. But, I'm not quite sure why you necessarily want to do it like that. Install the modules, Delphi stuff. So yeah, and there's the list of demonstration. All right, so I thought I'd just sort of show you some of the issues I've come across when I was trying to get this up and running. All the projects are opened as 64-bit by default in that so by default, if we pick one of these, they're all set to 64-bit. So because I'm running this in a previous version of Delphi 10.2, no, it should be able to compile for 64, but I wasn't able to get it to work in 64. You also need to install pip, which is the Python package manager program. And let's have a look. Yeah, in order to get that happening on my machine, you just run it from that directory. Not exactly obvious as to how it installs. So once you've completed the Python install, there's this thing called scripts. And I just ran the pip install. So that wasn't obvious from from this tutorial or the other ones that I was looking at. And you also need to install these libraries before you get moving. So basically, once you've got it installed, you go back to your command line. You got that? All those changes. Yeah. Pip install requests, and it should go off, and it says I've already got them installed. But otherwise, it would go off and it would pull down all the bits and pieces that it needs, and Python lib site packages. So actually, to answer the earlier question, this is probably, you probably need to install Python to use some of these libraries, because quite often, for example, we talked about Pillow. Here's your license. You may have to install, it may be dependent on other libraries as well. You know, NumPy, and there's a whole bunch. So you may be able to work out how to deploy the pieces, but as you can see, there's quite a lot of pieces involved in these libraries.
One of the things about pip is that it knows where to find everything you need, as long as you give it a correct library to install. For example, Steve, you might be able to show them installing SciPy, SCY, Pi, Science Pi.
SCI,
I think, PY.
PY. Okay.
So that's a scientific library. And it goes ahead and does everything you need to do to get it on your machine.
All right, so it said, well, as I pointed out, we had NumPy already.
Yeah.
So it said, okay, I've already got that.
That's it.
That's
You've
it.
now got a complete numerical and scientific package in your Delphi installation.
So the problem is probably going to be not how you're going to interface Delphi and Python. The problem's going to be reading the documentation on 250,000 libraries and working out which ones you actually want. But you know, there's bound to be some libraries that are available for what you need. I had to change the request location on that because it didn't work on here. If I go back to this this original article that piqued my interest, I've got my interest. It's got some stuff on there. It talks about the requests package and beautiful soup, how to use it. So this is basically the script that I used, and there's an example of his results. Talks about some of these other libraries, Instaloader, how do you get it? So, you know, download Instagram posts. You know, it's just a matter of working your way through these. Twitter data using Python Screenscape. So this one's an interesting social network screen scraping, which can do Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Telegram, Twitter. Never even heard of vContact and Weibo. So yeah, so if you're into OSI, open source information intelligence, you know, these are the sorts of tools that are being used to find out all about people and pulling down lots of data off lots of places. So Tweepy, retrieve Twitter tweets, easy for you to say, and yeah, I mean there'll be tons of other libraries out there. RSS, feed parsing. Google it if you're trying to get data off web screens. There's bound to be some sort of Python library out there in order to get it. Is there any other questions that I can't answer?
Steve, can you show us the commit history in the GitHub repository? Just in GitHub.
Beg your pardon?
Could you go to GitHub?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, and go back to the just click on the Python4Delphi link, top left.
Yeah.
And see the 734 commits.
Yeah.
Sort of middle-ish.
Yeah, I mean the last one 4 days ago.
No, just click on the 734. I just want to see how often people are contributing and who is contributing.
PyScripter, I think, is the owner of this. There's a few pulls, not many. Okay, there's a couple.
Okay, yep, that gives us an idea.
It's quite an active, seems to be quite a reasonably active library.
Am I correct in thinking that PyScripter is written in Delphi? Which could explain why they're the ones developing the interface for the two languages.
I believe it is, because basically there's nothing installed in Python to make this work. It's only you install the Delphi components.
But what is PyScripter?
Beg your pardon?
What is PyScripter?
PyScripter. Oh, that's the person who owns the repository. And I think if we look at I think this is PyScripter.
Okay. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, and I did come across. Oh, I think if you have a look at the, if you go back into the wiki, he talks about, he gives in the tutorials. Yeah, I believe in here he probably talks about himself or one of these videos.
All great to me.
So
Sorry
yeah.
to interrupt again.
Sure.
But the people who might want to learn how to use Pi, using PyScripter would be a great way to do it. It's like the Delphi IDE. You can do all the things in there in an IDE, as opposed to using a text editor to create Python files. You can do it just like you do with Delphi. Boom, 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 there's your script, run it. And it's free too.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so that just about concludes our presentation, and I guess now we sort of can talk about anything Delphi that anyone may want to bring up and discuss. So I don't know if anyone's got any anything Delphi Pascal related.
Steve, were you going to send us that document? Because I have a friend who does a lot of stuff in Lazarus and Python, might be interested in seeing it.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'm recording the session, so I will put that up on YouTube and pass it out. In fact, I'll finish the recording now, if you like. Stop. Where's my stop?
Might be able to answer more. Tonight we've seen a lot of what the Python libraries can do. For someone who doesn't know the Python language, like the language itself, what are the attractions of the language itself rather than the Python libraries?
Can
It's
you?
a very simple language to learn.
Yes.
Simpler than Pascal. Well, somewhere between BASIC and Pascal.
Okay. And just the capabilities of the language itself, is there much that you can do in it that you can't do in Delphi? If you were just like setting to write new code that wasn't sort of, you didn't need a bunch of the Python libraries, like why would you choose to write it in Python rather than Delphi, so to speak?
It's got some constructs that Delphi Pascal doesn't have. Things like lists, although you've got a string list and you've got lists in Delphi, you've got much more capable functions and procedures you can apply to them. It's a more sophisticated language than Delphi. It's Delphi, of course, because it's compiled, runs like the blazes. So you wouldn't write your Delphi counterpart in pure Python. It would just be slow. That's why you leverage these libraries that other people have built for free with source code to do just about anything you could possibly think of.
Yeah, I think it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to produce some new fandangled application that you're going to distribute to thousands of people, it's going to have buttons and wheels and levers and you know, it's a GUI application, then it's going to lend itself towards a Delphi application. If you've got a requirement to go off and screen scrape, you know, a whole bunch of websites for a specific purpose, then you do it in Python. I mean, Python is probably going to be a more hands-on. It's going to be more hands-on installation. I think you're going to make the distribution of the application a bit harder. You've got to install Python. You've got to install pip. You've got to download the libraries. Once you've got them, then you can do a lot of things. Python has got, there's libraries out there for creating web pages, being a source for generating web content, and you could be using Python in the back end for that. Really, I think from our perspective as the Delphi community, I think you would probably only lean towards Python if for the libraries. I wouldn't necessarily see you using Python if you're a Delphi developer, you've got Delphi skills, and you don't need a Python library, then I wouldn't see that there's the need for you to have Python. On the other hand, there's so many things that can be done using free, off-the-shelf, widely supported libraries like Pillow. I recall recently, or maybe a few months back, on the ADUG mail-out list, discussion about various image processing libraries, and there were commercial options. Maybe you don't have the budget to purchase some commercial options that do this image processing. Maybe that can be done with the Python off-the-shelf library. There's a ton of AI, machine learning libraries out there, and it's always a matter of using the right tools for the right job. And I think I spoke about Maslow's hammer a year or so ago, it might have been longer. Maslow's law is if the only, basically translates to if the only tool you've got is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. Well, I believe as developers, we should know about what options we have, and learning a bit of Python and learning about what it can do is certainly another string to any developer's bow. So that's part of why I have an interest in Python. I haven't worked with Python. I actually haven't touched Python for probably nearly a year now, but it's there, and I'm aware of what it can do, and yeah, that's.
My friend uses it to create web content, like graphs that calculate all their data and tabulate it and everything, with all Python scripts built into his web pages. The other thing I know it's really good for is Internet of Things. If you want to program Raspberry Pis or something, I actually do it in Lazarus, but it's actually probably easier and more flexible with a lot of those little boards to use Python, which is usually available for them.
Yeah.
I've recently needed or wanted to extract images from a PDF file. 3 lines of Python did that with one of the libraries. And I looked at the commercial availability of Delphi. They started at about $300 American. You can't go past it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I promised I'd stop recording, which I didn't do. So I'll do that right now.